My name is Walter, and at 32 years old, I never imagined my life would turn out this way. For decades, I poured my heart into winning my parents' approval, while watching my younger sister receive endless praise for minimal effort. Everything changed the day they gifted her $280,000 for a house while calling me a failure to my face. That night, I made the hardest decision of my life, cutting them off completely. What happened 2 years later shocked even me. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if family drama hits close to home, and subscribe to join our community of real-life stories. Trust me, you will want to see how this one ends. Growing up in our suburban home, the inequality between how my sister and I were treated was as obvious as the granite countertops my father, James, insisted on installing to impress his business associates. At 55, my father had built a successful consulting firm through relentless work and unwavering standards. My mother, Diana, 53, taught high school English with the same perfectionism she applied to our family image. Then there was Sophia, my sister, 4 years younger than me at 28, who somehow existed under completely different rules. From my earliest memories, my parents had mapped out my entire life. Piano lessons began at age 4. Not because I showed any particular interest, but because Father believed it would develop the discipline needed for success. By 2nd grade, I was enrolled in advanced math courses. My weekends disappeared into academic competitions rather than baseball games with neighborhood kids. No matter how well I performed, it was never enough. An A- on a report card meant a 3-hour lecture about commitment. 2nd place in the science fair triggered weeks of disapproving glances and additional study sessions. My father would stand over my desk, checking each homework problem with surgical precision, his sighs growing heavier with each minor error. Sophia, however, lived in a parallel universe of endless second chances. When she abandoned piano after just 2 months of lessons, Mother explained that not everyone needs to be musical. When she struggled with basic algebra, they hired the most expensive tutor in town and praised her for simply attending the sessions. When she quit the debate team mid-season because it was too much pressure, they celebrated her self-awareness. My 10th birthday provided a perfect example of the double standard. I received educational books and a lecture about entering double digits with more responsibility. 6 months later, Sophia turned 6 and got a lavish party with a bouncy castle, professional face painters, and a custom cake that cost more than all my birthday celebrations combined. High school graduation followed the same pattern. My parents acknowledged my valedictorian speech with polite nods before spending the entire dinner gushing over Sophia's C+ in chemistry. During Christmas, my practical gifts of clothes and school supplies contrasted sharply with her new laptop, smartphone, and vacation to Hawaii. Around 16, I discovered woodworking in a required shop class. Something about transforming raw lumber into functional art spoke to my soul in a way nothing else had. The shop teacher, Mr. Wilson, noticed my natural talent and allowed me to use the workshop during lunch breaks. For the first time, I found something that felt like mine, not an obligation or another bar to clear. When I mentioned potentially pursuing carpentry after graduation, the temperature at our dinner table dropped 20 degrees. Father slammed down his fork and launched into a tirade about wasting potential. My mother tearfully wondered where they had gone wrong as parents. The only acceptable paths in their eyes were medicine, law, or at minimum a business degree from an Ivy League school. The tension grew unbearable during my senior year. College applications became battlegrounds, with my parents insisting I apply to medical schools, despite my complete lack of interest in becoming a doctor. Each conversation ended the same way, with my father declaring I was throwing away my future and my mother looking disappointed enough to break my heart. Despite their pressure, I stood firm. Something had changed in me. The more they pushed me toward their vision, the more I clung to my own. The workshop became my sanctuary, the place where I could breathe freely and create something authentic. Each finished project, whether a simple box or an intricate chess set, confirmed what I already knew in my heart: this was my calling. The day after high school graduation, I packed 2 suitcases and moved out. With only $1,800 saved from odd jobs, I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but anything seemed better than suffocating under their expectations. I found a tiny studio apartment on the rough side of town, the kind of place my parents would never visit even if invited. My first job paid minimum wage at a construction company where I was little more than a human pack mule, carrying lumber and cleaning up job sites. Each night I would collapse onto my second-hand mattress muscles, aching hands blistered but with a strange sense of pride. This struggle was mine, not manufactured by my parents, and each callus felt like a badge of honor. The studio apartment was barely 500 square feet with a kitchenette that consisted of a hot plate and mini fridge. The bathroom had a persistent mold problem that no amount of bleach seemed to conquer. But the rent was just $600 monthly, allowing me to save a small amount from each paycheck while paying for night classes at the local trade school. Ramen noodles became both breakfast and dinner most days. I walked 3 miles to work to save on bus fare. Every penny mattered in this new reality. Sometimes, sitting alone in that tiny apartment, the doubts would creep in. Maybe my parents were right. Maybe I was throwing everything away on a foolish dream. 6 months into this new life, I met Frank Henderson while delivering materials to a custom furniture shop. At 50, Frank had the weathered hands and quiet confidence of someone who had mastered his craft through decades of dedication. Unlike the other contractors who barely acknowledged me, Frank asked questions about my interest in woodworking and actually listened to the answers. When I mentioned my night classes, his eyes lit up. After my shift ended, he invited me to tour his workshop. The space was nothing short of magical to me. Tools organized with military precision, the air thick with the scent of sawdust and varnish, and most importantly, pieces of furniture so beautiful they looked like they belonged in museums. When I asked if I could work for you, Frank looked surprised. "Your current job pays better," he said. I explained that money mattered less to me than learning from a true craftsman. 2 weeks later, I started as his apprentice with a significant pay cut, but the promise of knowledge worth far more than dollars. The learning curve was steep. 14-hour days became my new normal. Frank was a patient teacher, but demanded precision. My first attempts at fine joinery were embarrassing disasters. I spent entire weekends practicing the same cut hundreds of times until my muscles memorized the correct movements. Frank taught me that woodworking was as much about developing intuition as technical skill, learning to read the grain of each unique piece of timber. Beyond the craft itself, Frank shared business wisdom. He explained how to price projects to value both materials and labor fairly, how to communicate with clients about realistic timelines, and most importantly, how to stand behind your work with integrity even when mistakes happen. My first independent project was a disaster by any objective measure. The client wanted a simple dining table, and I confidently promised completion in 2 weeks. It took 4 required 3 do-overs on the tabletop and ultimately yielded barely any profit. Rather than discouraging me, this experience crystallized how much I still needed to learn. Gradually, projects became more successful. Word spread about the young carpenter who took unusual care with details. Small commissions for end tables and bookshelves gave way to larger projects. By my 4th year working with Frank, I had saved $15,000 and built a modest portfolio of work I was genuinely proud of. Throughout this time, I maintained minimal contact with my family. Holiday visits were tense affairs, filled with loaded questions about when I would get a real career. My father would introduce me to his friends with qualifiers. "This is Walter. He is working in construction until he figures things out." My mother would slip me business school brochures like contraband. Sophia, now cruising through college, with mediocre grades and maximum parental support, would smirk from across the room during these exchanges. Despite everything, some stubborn part of me still craved their approval. Each small success in my budding career was mentally rehearsed as a future conversation where they would finally see the value in the path I had chosen. I held on to hope that eventually they would recognize my passion wasn't a phase but a legitimate life choice worthy of respect. The invitation came via text from my mother family dinner Sunday at 6. Important news to discuss. Please be on time. After a grueling week, completing a custom entertainment center for a demanding client, the last thing I wanted was another tense family meal. But curiosity got the better of me. Sunday evening arrived, and I pulled into the familiar driveway of my childhood home. The property looked immaculate as always, not a blade of grass out of place. Through the windows I could see my parents and Sophia already seated in the formal living room, the one reserved for important conversations and visiting dignitaries. Walking in the tension was immediate. Father sat in his leather armchair, tumbler of scotch in hand, wearing the satisfied expression I recognized from his business victories. Mother perched on the edge of the sofa, nervously adjusting and readjusting the cushions. Sophia and her boyfriend Jack occupied the love seat, practically vibrating with barely contained excitement. After minimal pleasantries, my father cleared his throat dramatically. "We have wonderful news," he announced, looking directly at Sophia. "Your sister and Jack have found their dream home in Lakeside Estates." Mother chimed in. "It's the most charming colonial 4 bedrooms, perfect for when they start a family." Sophia squealed with rehearsed delight. "It's absolutely perfect, Walter. You should see the kitchen, all marble and stainless steel. And the backyard has this gorgeous oak tree that would be perfect for a swing set someday." I offered a genuine smile, happy for her despite our complicated relationship. "That's great, Soph. Lakeside Estates is an expensive neighborhood, though. You must be doing well at the marketing firm." An awkward silence followed, with my parents exchanging meaningful glances. Finally, Father spoke again. "Actually, that's why we wanted you here today. Your mother and I are giving Sophia and Jack $280,000 for the down payment. We want to make sure they start their life together, on solid financial footing." The room seemed to tilt slightly. $280,000. The number echoed in my head as I struggled to maintain my composure. "That's very generous," I managed to say, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Sophia beamed. "Isn't it amazing? We can move in next month." Jack squeezed her hand, looking as though he had just won the lottery, which in a way he had. Something about their expressions triggered a memory. Years earlier, I'd overheard my parents discussing college funds they had established for both of us at birth. Equal amounts set aside for our futures. I had assumed mine went toward my trade school tuition, but that had only cost a fraction of such a sum. I turned to my father, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is this from our college funds?" I never saw much of mine. The temperature in the room dropped instantly. My father's expression hardened. "Your sister is putting her education to good use. She graduated with honors and has a proper career ahead of her." "But what about my portion?" I asked, feeling a knot form in my stomach. I may not have gone the traditional college route, but I could use help too. "I'm saving to buy land, start my own business." Mother let out a sharp laugh that sounded nothing like her usual carefully modulated tones. "A business making tables." "Walter, be realistic." My father leaned forward, his voice taking on the cutting edge I remembered from childhood disappointments. "Walter, let's be clear. That money was for building a future, not indulging a hobby. Your sister has shown she can be successful. What have you accomplished? Living in that tiny apartment, working with your hands, like a common laborer." Each word landed like a physical blow. I looked to Sophia for support, but she stared at the carpet, her silence an endorsement of their assessment. My mother joined in, her voice dripping with disappointment. "We had such hopes for you. You could have been a doctor, a lawyer, anything you wanted. Instead, you're what? A carpenter." She said the word as if it tasted bitter on her tongue. Then came the words that shattered whatever remained of our relationship. Father stood pointing at me with the hand that held his scotch. "Let's face it, Walter. You're the failure of this family. Always have been. We invested in Sophia because she has potential. You squandered yours." I stood up so quickly the coffee table rattled, sending Mother's carefully arranged magazines cascading to the floor. The room fell silent as I looked at each of them, these people who shared my blood, but apparently nothing else. Sophia finally spoke, her voice small. "Walter, don't be dramatic. We all make choices. I chose a path that made sense." I turned to her, this sister. Id tried to protect and support despite the uneven treatment. And look how well it paid off. Right. $280,000 well. Without waiting for a response, I walked to the door. Behind me, I heard my mother call my name. But there was no apology in her tone, only annoyance at my reaction. As I reached for the doorknob, my father delivered one final blow. "This is exactly why you'll never amount to anything, Walter. You run away when things get difficult. Just like you're running from a real career." I paused, hand on the door. For the first time in my life, I felt something snap inside me, not in defeat, but in liberation. Without turning around, I replied, "No, Father. I'm not running away from anything. I'm walking away from people who never believed in me. There's a difference." The door closed behind me with a decisive click. Sitting in my car, I realized I was shaking not from sadness, but from a strange combination of rage and relief. 25 years of seeking approval from people incapable of giving it ended that night. In its place, a hollow feeling spread through my chest, but also something else, something that felt surprisingly like freedom. The week after the family dinner was the darkest of my life. Sleep became elusive, replaced by endless mental replays of my father's words. "You're the failure of this family." The phrase followed me like a shadow, whispering in quiet moments and shouting during attempts to focus on work. I ruined 3 pieces of expensive walnut through simple mistakes that would have embarrassed a first-year apprentice. Frank noticed my distraction but didn't pry. Instead, he invited me fishing, something we'd never done together before. On a small boat in the middle of the lake with no escape route, he finally asked what was eating me alive. The whole story poured out of me between casts, punctuated by the gentle splash of lures hitting water. When I finished, Frank remained silent for several minutes. I expected platitudes about family being family, or advice to make peace. Instead, he said something that changed my perspective entirely. "Not everyone deserves access to your life, Walter. Even family has to earn their place." That night, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and necessary. I would cut all contact with my family. No more holiday dinners filled with subtle jabs. No more seeking approval that would never come. No more comparing myself to Sophia. I would build a life so completely mine that their opinions couldn't touch it. The process was methodical. First, I blocked their numbers on my phone. Then email addresses. Social media connections severed one by one. It felt strange, like amputating a limb that had been causing chronic pain for years, painful in the moment but necessary for healing. Before completing the digital excision, I wrote a lengthy email explaining my decision. I detailed decades of unequal treatment, the constant belittlement of my chosen career, and finally the profound betrayal of the family dinner. I didn't send it expecting a response or apology. It was for me a formal declaration of independence. With personal ties severed, I threw myself into work with monastic dedication. 14-hour days became normal. Frank worried I was burning out, but the physical exhaustion provided relief from emotional turmoil. Each piece I created felt like a rebuttal to my father's assessment of my worth. 6 months of this intense focus yielded results. My craftsmanship improved dramatically. Clients began requesting me specifically after seeing previous work. My savings grew steadily, and with it a plan formed. I would build my own house from foundation to roof with my own hands. It would stand as physical proof of my capability, even if no one but me ever recognized it. After researching affordable land options, I found a 5-acre plot 30 miles outside the city. Remote enough to be affordable but close enough to maintain client relationships. The property featured rolling hills, a small stream, and most importantly, a grove of mature oak trees. At $65,000, it would require every penny of my $15,000 savings plus a $50,000 construction loan. The bank manager raised eyebrows at my profession and age, but approved the loan after reviewing my consistent income history and business plan. The day I signed the papers, a weight lifted from my shoulders. This piece of earth was mine, purchased through my own effort, without family connections or advantages. During this time, I met Rachel at a client installation. As an interior designer, she had commissioned a custom dining table and came to supervise its placement. While other designers I had worked with treated craftspeople as interchangeable tools, Rachel asked thoughtful questions about wood choice and joinery techniques. Her genuine interest was refreshing, and I found myself lingering long after the table was perfectly positioned. Our professional relationship quickly evolved into friendship, and then something more. On our third date, I brought her to my newly purchased land. Standing among the oak trees as sunset painted the sky in ambitious oranges and pinks, I shared my vision for a house that would blend harmoniously with the natural surroundings. Rachel didn't laugh or suggest hiring contractors. Instead, she pulled out a sketchbook and began drawing possible floor plans. Together, we designed a modest but elegant home, 1,600 square feet, with 2 bedrooms, an open-concept living area, and most importantly, a workshop nearly as large as the house itself. The design featured extensive windows to connect indoor spaces with the surrounding nature and exposed wooden beams that would showcase my craftsmanship. Construction began in early spring. Each day after working at Frank's shop, I would drive to my land and work until darkness forced me to stop. Weekends disappeared into a blur of physical labor. I poured the foundation myself, after watching dozens of instructional videos. The frame rose slowly but steadily, each beam cut and placed with precision. The challenges were numerous and sometimes overwhelming. Summer brought torrential rains that flooded the partially completed structure. Fall winds knocked down a wall that took 3 days to rebuild. My budget stretched dangerously thin when lumber prices unexpectedly spiked. Rachel found me one night sitting in my truck staring at the half-built structure, silently calculating whether I could afford to continue. Instead of offering empty encouragement, she handed me a folder containing applications for 3 design clients who wanted custom furniture. She had recommended me specifically, essentially handing me enough work to cover the next phase of construction. That night, under a blanket of stars, I realized I had found someone who believed in me, without condition or qualification, a foreign but welcome experience. Progress was slower than planned. What I had optimistically projected as a 6-month build stretched into a year, then 15 months. Rachel moved in with me at my apartment to save on rent, turning the tiny space into a command center for both of our growing businesses. Evenings were spent refining designs, weekends dedicated to turning those designs into reality. Throughout this period, not once did I contact my family or respond to the occasional message that made it through my digital barricades. Mother sent emails on holidays with superficial updates about relatives I barely remembered. Father predictably remained silent, Sophia sent a Christmas card with a photo of her and Jack in front of their new house, the one purchased with my portion of our inheritance. I filed these communications away without response, each one affecting me less than the last. 18 months after breaking ground, I placed the last handcrafted cedar shingle on the roof of my home. Standing in the gravel driveway arm around Rachel's waist, I surveyed what we had created together. The house seemed to emerge organically from the landscape, its natural wood siding weathering to a silver gray that complemented the surrounding oak trees. Large windows reflected the clouds above, and the stone chimney promised warmth during the approaching winter. Inside, every detail reflected thousands of hours of labor and love. The open-concept main floor featured hand-scraped oak flooring that I had milled from trees cleared during construction. The kitchen cabinets showcased dovetail joinery and hand-forged hardware from an artisan Rachel had connected with. The central island, my personal masterpiece, was crafted from a single massive walnut slab with a live edge that preserved the natural contour of the tree. The 2 bedrooms were modest in size, but featured built-in storage that maximized space while displaying my growing skill with complex cabinetry. The master bedroom had a reading nook, nestled in a bay window that overlooked the stream, Rachel's favorite spot for morning coffee. The second bedroom functioned as her design studio, with custom drafting tables and material storage solutions. My workshop, attached but separate from the main house, was every woodworker's dream. 20-foot ceilings accommodated even the tallest projects. Windows positioned to maximize natural light reduced the need for artificial illumination during daylight hours. Custom tool storage kept everything organized and accessible. A small wood-burning stove crafted by a blacksmith friend provided sustainable heat during winter months. Rachel, whose eye for marketing matched her design talent, suggested documenting the final stages of construction for her social media accounts. She photographed the house at different times of day, capturing how the light played across the architectural features. So carefully planned, she created before and after slideshows, showcasing the transformation from raw land to finished home. Her posts gained traction among design enthusiasts and sustainability advocates alike. One evening, while I was finishing a client project in the workshop, Rachel burst through the door, practically bouncing with excitement. "A Thomas Greenfield just called," she announced. "He saw my posts about our house and wants to see it in person tomorrow." I recognized the name immediately. Thomas Greenfield was one of the largest real estate developers in the region, known for creating upscale residential communities with a focus on architectural integrity. The following afternoon, Greenfield arrived in a luxury SUV that looked comically out of place on our gravel driveway. A tall man with silver hair and a tailored suit, he seemed genuinely interested as I guided him through the house, asking detailed questions about construction methods and material sources. In the workshop, he ran his hand along a half-completed dining table, nodding appreciatively at the joinery. Back on the porch overlooking the property, he made an unexpected offer. "I'd like to buy this house," he stated matter-of-factly. $450,000 cash, 30-day closing. You can take any personal items, and the tools from your workshop, of course. The number stunned me into momentary silence. The property and construction had cost approximately $115,000 total. Even factoring in countless hours of labor, his offer represented a substantial profit. Rachel squeezed my hand, leaving the decision entirely to me. This house represented more than financial investment. It was physical proof of my capabilities, a direct rebuttal to my father's assessment of my worth. Yet the businessman in me, the part Frank had carefully nurtured, recognized an opportunity too significant to dismiss on emotional grounds. "I will need some time to consider," I replied, trying to mask my shock. Greenfield smiled. "Take 48 hours. But I should mention, I'm not just interested in this house. I'm interested in your work. The craftsmanship here is exceptional." He handed me his business card with a personal number scrawled on the back. Whatever you decide about the house, call me. I have other projects that could benefit from your approach." After he left, Rachel and I sat on the porch steps, contemplating this unexpected fork in our path. Selling meant giving up our dream home, the one Wed poured our souls into creating. Not selling meant passing on capital that could launch something bigger than either of us had imagined. By morning, a new vision had formed. If I could create one house that impressed someone like Greenfield, I could create others. With the profit from this sale, Rachel and I could purchase a larger property and build not just one home but several. We could combine my construction skills with her design expertise to create unique custom homes for clients seeking something beyond cookie-cutter developments. 2 weeks later, we accepted Greenfield's offer. The day we signed the closing documents, he introduced us to a couple seeking a custom home built using sustainable practices. We had our first clients before Wed even deposited the check. Handcrafted Homes LLC became official the following month with Rachel and I as equal partners. We purchased 20 acres of land with a mixture of wooded areas and meadows, perfect for creating a small community of custom homes. Our business plan was simple but distinctive. Rachel would handle design and client relations, while I would oversee construction, focusing on quality craftsmanship and sustainable building practices. Within 2 years, we had completed and sold 5 custom homes, each more profitable than the last. Our reputation grew through word of mouth and Rachel's savvy social media presence. A feature in Modern Living magazine brought national attention and a waiting list of clients willing to pay premium prices for our unique approach to home building. Success necessitated expansion. I hired and trained a team of 15 craftspeople, many recent graduates from the same trade school I'd attended. Rachel brought on 2 junior designers to help manage the growing client list. We purchased additional equipment, including a portable sawmill, that allowed us to process timber from our own land, further distinguishing our homes through truly local materials. Our most ambitious project, Woodland Haven, began taking shape in our 3rd year of operation. The concept was a small, exclusive community of 10 custom homes, each uniquely designed but sharing a cohesive aesthetic that complemented the natural environment. Building sites were carefully selected to preserve mature trees and natural water features. Shared amenities included hiking trails, a community garden, and a small lake stocked with fish. As Woodland Haven progressed, Rachel and I built our personal residence on the highest point of the property. Larger and more refined than our first home, it nevertheless maintained the connection to nature and emphasis on craftsmanship that defined our work. The great room featured 30-foot ceilings with exposed timber framing. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided panoramic views of the developing community below. From my office window, I could watch homes rising across the landscape, each one representing the vision Rachel and I had built together. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I would think about my father calling me a failure and feel a complex mixture of emotions. Not vindication exactly, but a deep-settled certainty that I had found my true path despite rather than because of my family. The confrontation I had long anticipated but ceased expecting arrived on a brilliant autumn day, 2 years after I had last seen any member of my family. I was reviewing architectural plans with our construction manager when Rachel knocked on my office door. Her expression, an unusual mixture of amusement and concern. "Walter," she said carefully, "your sister is downstairs in the sales office. She looks pretty upset." My first instinct was to refuse the meeting to protect the life and peace I'd carefully constructed. But curiosity prevailed. I hadn't heard anything about Sophia since a mutual childhood friend mentioned her marriage to Jack had become strained shortly after moving into their subsidized dream home. I found her pacing in our elegantly appointed sales center, looking simultaneously out of place and eerily familiar. She wore the polished, business-casual uniform of corporate America, but her eyes held the wild, slightly panicked look I remembered from childhood mishaps when she feared parental disapproval. "Walter," she gasped when she saw me. "This is your company. All of this is yours." She gestured broadly at the wall of awards, and the scale model of Woodland Haven that dominated the center of the room. I maintained a professional distance both physically and emotionally. "Hello, Sophia." "Yes. Handcrafted Homes is my company.co. Founded with my partner Rachel. What brings you here?" She shook her head in disbelief. "I was driving around looking at properties. Jack and I are separating, and I need to find something smaller." She swallowed hard before continuing. "I saw your sign at the entrance. The logo looked familiar, but I thought it must be coincidence. Then I drove through and saw all this." She waved her hand toward the window where several completed homes stood proudly among the trees. "When I asked the sales agent who owned the development, she said your name. I nearly fainted. I remained silent, unsure what response she expected or deserved. Sophia filled the uncomfortable void with nervous chatter. "I called Dad immediately." She looked at her expensive watch. "He and Mom should be here any minute. I told them they needed to see this, to see what you've accomplished." A familiar tension crawled up my spine. 2 years of silence had dulled the pain of rejection, but apparently not eliminated it entirely. "Would you like some coffee while you wait?" I asked, retreating to the safety of social niceties. Before she could answer, the glass doors of the sales center swung open. My parents entered looking exactly as I remembered, yet somehow diminished. Father still imposing in his tailored suit, but with notably more gray at his temples. Mother elegant as always, but with new lines around her eyes that makeup couldn't quite conceal. My father stopped abruptly when he saw me, causing my mother to bump into him from behind. His eyes darted around the sales center, taking in the sophisticated branding, the architectural models, and the wall displaying press coverage and industry awards. "Walter." My mother said, her voice carrying the same artificial brightness I remembered from childhood situations she found uncomfortable. What a lovely surprise. She stepped forward as if to embrace me, then hesitated when I didn't move to meet her. My father recovered his composure and extended his hand formally, as if meeting a business associate rather than his son. "This is quite an operation you've built," he said, his tone suggesting he was conducting an assessment rather than offering praise. I shook his hand briefly, the contact feeling strange after so much time. "Thank you. Rachel and I have worked hard to create something unique." "Rachel," he repeated. "Your partner?" "My fiancée and business partner," I clarified. "She's our lead designer and handles client relations." I noticed my father filing away this information, recalculating whatever mental equations he used to measure success and status. Sophia hovered nervously between us, looking from face to face as if watching a tennis match with unpredictable players. Mother broke the tense silence. "We had no idea you were doing so well, Walter. You never returned our calls or emails." The implied accusation reignited embers of anger I thought had cooled. I considered pointing out that their communications had never contained apologies, only superficial pleasantries that ignored the chasm between us. Instead, I simply said, "I needed space to build my own life." Father, never one for emotional nuance, got straight to business. "How many homes have you built here? What's your profit margin? Are you leveraging the current market demand for sustainable building practices?" Before I could answer, the door opened again, and Rachel entered carrying a tray with coffee and water. I made the introductions, watching as my family assessed this woman who had become my closest ally and partner. Rachel, warm but perceptive, engaged them in conversation about the development while subtly gathering intelligence on their sudden appearance. My father, recognizing a fellow's sharp mind, directed most of his questions to her, probing for business details, while I observed the interaction. After 20 minutes of surprisingly civil conversation, my father cleared his throat and made his play. "Walter, now that we've seen what you're capable of, I think it's time to discuss a partnership." My firm has clients who would be very interested in sustainable luxury homes. He named a figure that would have seemed astronomical to me 3 years ago. I'm prepared to invest that amount immediately for a 20% stake in your company. The room fell silent. My mother smiled encouragingly. Sophia looked between us with undisguised fascination. Rachel squeezed my hand under the conference table, silently communicating her support for whatever decision I made. In that moment, I saw clearly what was happening. This wasn't reconciliation or recognition of past wrongs. This was my father doing what he had always done, identifying a profitable opportunity and moving to control it. I was still just a vehicle for his ambitions, valuable now, only because I had proven financially successful. "Thank you for the offer," I said carefully. "But Handcrafted Homes isn't accepting outside investors at this time. We're quite comfortable with our current growth trajectory and financing options." My father's face darkened with the familiar expression that had terrorized me throughout childhood. "This isn't some emotional decision, is it, Walter M? Offering you a significant capital injection and access to high-net-worth clients. Any rational businessman would jump at this opportunity." "It is absolutely a business decision," I replied, finding strength in the truth of my words. "Our company values our independence and direct relationship with clients. An outside investor with different priorities would compromise what makes us unique in the market." My father stood abruptly, straightening his jacket with sharp, angry movements. "I see you're still letting emotions cloud your judgment. Some things never change." He turned to my mother. "Diana, we're leaving." My mother looked torn, glancing between my father and me. "Walter, can't we at least talk about this as a family? It's been 2 years. We miss you." The simplicity of her statement, "we miss you," landed like a stone in still water. Not "we were wrong" or "we're sorry." Just, "we miss having you in our lives, on their terms, playing your assigned role." Sophia spoke up for the first time since our parents arrived. "Mom, maybe we should listen to Walter. It's his company. He built all this without any help from us." In fact, she hesitated, glancing nervously at our father. "In fact, we actively discouraged him, called him a failure. Remember?" Father whirled on her betrayal, evident in his expression. "That's ancient history and completely irrelevant to the business opportunity on the table now." I stood suddenly tired of the familiar dynamic playing out before me. "If you'd like to continue this conversation in a more private setting, you're welcome to come to our home this evening. 7 o'clock. Rachel and I would be happy to host dinner. But I want to be clear, no business discussion. If you're interested in reconnecting as family, I'm open to that conversation. If you're only here because you see a financial opportunity, then there's nothing more to discuss." My mother immediately accepted while my father fumed silently. Sophia looked relieved at the prospect of diffusing the tension. After exchanging contact information and our address, they departed, leaving the sales center feeling both emptier and somehow lighter. Rachel wrapped her arms around me from behind. "You okay?" she asked, resting her chin on my shoulder. I turned to face her. Surprisingly, yes. For the first time, I saw them clearly, without the fog of seeking approval. And I realized something important. I don't need them to validate my choices anymore. Her smile was worth more than any investment my father could have offered. That's what I call personal growth, Walter Johnson. Now let's go home and prepare for an interesting dinner party. The evening sun cast long shadows across our property as I stood on the porch watching 3 figures emerge from my father's luxury sedan. They paused, taking in the scale of our home with varying expressions of surprise. The house, a modern interpretation of mountain lodge architecture with massive timber elements and walls of glass, made a statement without trying particularly hard, exactly the effect Rachel and I had intended. I had spent the afternoon oscillating between anticipation and anxiety about this reunion. Rachel, steady as always, reminded me that regardless of the outcome we had, built something beautiful together, both in our relationship and our business. Their approval or disapproval couldn't change that fundamental truth. "Welcome," I called from the porch, trying to sound more relaxed than I felt. They climbed the steps with the awkward formality of distant acquaintances rather than family. Inside, Rachel had prepared a casual but impressive spread of local seasonal foods, many grown in our community garden. The great room, with its soaring ceilings and panoramic views of the valley below, elicited audible gasps from my mother and sister. The initial conversation focused on safe topics: the construction of the house, Rachel's design philosophy, the surprising popularity of Woodland Haven among tech executives seeking peaceful retreats. My father remained largely silent, his eyes constantly moving, calculating, and assessing our success with almost mathematical precision. After dinner, Rachel suggested giving my mother and sister a tour of her design studio, tactfully providing space for my father and me to speak privately. We moved to the deck overlooking the illuminated grounds below the lights of completed homes, twinkling among the trees like earthbound stars. "You seem to have done well for yourself," he finally said, breaking a silence that had stretched uncomfortably. Despite my concerns about your choice of career, I let the backhanded compliment hang in the air for a moment before responding. "I'm successful because of my career choice, not in spite of it. My hands-on experience gives us an edge over developers who subcontract everything. Our clients pay premium prices specifically because I understand every aspect of the building process." He sipped his whiskey, considering my words with unusual thoughtfulness. "I may have been wrong about the financial viability of your path," he conceded, though the admission clearly cost him. "But you can't deny that our pushing you, our high expectations, helped develop the work ethic that made all this possible." I had anticipated this attempt to reframe the past to claim credit for success he had actively discouraged. It was so predictable I almost smiled. "My success isn't about proving you wrong. It stopped being about you altogether once I realized I needed to build a life on my own terms." His expression hardened. "After everything your mother and I did for you, I interrupted something I would never have dared before. What exactly did you do for me? You pushed me toward paths I had no interest in. You compared me constantly to Sophia. You called me a failure to my face and gave my sister $280,000 that was partially meant for my education. You told me I would never amount to anything." The truth laid bare between us seemed to physically shrink him. He looked suddenly older, more vulnerable. "I don't apologize easily, Walter. You know that. It's not how I was raised." I know I said, feeling unexpected compassion for this proud man struggling to navigate unfamiliar emotional territory. But relationships, like buildings, need solid foundations. We can't build anything meaningful on pretense. Inside, I could hear laughter, as Rachel apparently shared something amusing with my mother and sister. The sound highlighted the absence of such lightness between my father and me. He set down his glass with deliberate care. "What exactly do you want from me, Walter?" The question surprised me, not because it was asked, but because I had a clear answer. "I don't want anything from you anymore. That's the point. I'm not seeking your approval or your money. What I'm offering is the possibility of a relationship based on mutual respect, not obligation or authority." He considered this, looking out over the property I had built from nothing. "And if I can't give that, if I can't change how I see the world at my age?" I shrugged, feeling strangely peaceful. "Then we continue as we have been. My life is fulfilling without your presence in it. I would welcome a genuine relationship with my father, but not at the cost of my self-respect or happiness." Inside, my mother approached with cautious hope. "Rachel was showing us the plans for the community center," she said. "It's remarkable what you've created here, Walter." She hesitated, then added softly, "I'm sorry we didn't see your potential sooner." Her apology, though incomplete, felt more genuine than anything it expected from this evening. "Thank you, Mom. That means a lot." Sophia joined us, her expression more serious than earlier. "Can we talk somewhere, Walter?" Just the two of us. We walked to the edge of the deck, leaning against the railing side by side, like we sometimes had as children. "I need to apologize," she began, her voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "I should have stood up for you that night. When they called you a failure and gave me all that money, I should have said something." "Why didn't you?" I asked, not accusingly, but with genuine curiosity. She stared into the darkness. "Honestly, because it benefited me not to. Because I was selfish and afraid of losing their approval." She turned to face me directly. "The house they helped us buy, Jack and I are selling it. The marriage lasted barely 18 months. I'm sorry to hear that," I said, meaning it, "despite our complicated history." "Don't be. It was a mistake from the start." She smiled ruefully. "It turns out houses don't fix relationship problems. Money doesn't guarantee happiness." Pretty obvious lessons, but I had to learn them the hard way. Her vulnerability opened a door I thought permanently closed. We talked for nearly an hour, really talked about our childhood, our parents' expectations, and the divergent paths our lives had taken. For the first time, we connected as adults, rather than as competitors in our parents' approval economy. When the evening concluded, no dramatic reconciliation had occurred. My father remained largely unchanged, though perhaps more thoughtful than before. My mother extended tentative offers of future contact. Sophia hugged me tightly and whispered, "Thanks for showing her a different way to live." Over the following months, a new pattern emerged. Occasional family dinners, sometimes tense, but increasingly genuine. My father never fully acknowledged his role in our estrangement, but he developed a grudging respect for my business acumen. My mother made greater efforts to understand my chosen path, even volunteering at one of our community building projects. Sophia, following her divorce, found work with an environmental nonprofit and discovered purpose beyond our parents' narrow definition of success. 6 months after that first dinner, Rachel and I married in a small ceremony on our property. My family attended somewhat awkwardly, but present nonetheless. During the reception, I found myself standing with Frank, watching my father attempt polite conversation with Rachel's eclectic artist friends. "You were right," I told my mentor and friend. "Not everyone deserves access to your life. Family has to earn their place like anyone else." Frank nodded sagely. "The harder lesson is learning to let people earn their way back when they've wronged you. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about not letting it control your future." That wisdom guided my approach to healing family wounds. I maintained firm boundaries while leaving space for new, healthier relationships to form. Some days brought progress, others setbacks. The journey wasn't linear, but it was authentic. Woodland Haven flourished beyond our original vision, expanding to neighboring properties as demand grew. Rachel and I welcomed our first child, a daughter who would grow up understanding the value of creating with her hands and following her own path, whatever that might be. On quiet evenings, standing on our deck with Rachel beside me, surveying all we'd built together, I often reflect on the strange path that led here. The painful rejection that forced me to find my own way. The freedom that came from stepping outside expectations designed by others. Sometimes the greatest gift is being underestimated. Sometimes the most powerful response to being called a failure is not proving critics wrong, but building something so authentic they become irrelevant to your story. If you've ever been underestimated or had to forge your own path against others' expectations, I hope this story resonates with you. Have you ever had to distance yourself from toxic relationships to grow? How did you handle rebuilding connections afterward? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story meant something to you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life journeys of resilience and redemption. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes walking away is the first step toward finding where you truly belong.